2026 has just begun, and the US-Japan relationship is entering a pivotal moment. In Japan, Prime Minister Takaichi is seeking support for increased spending and a new security strategy. Meanwhile, in the United States, President Trump is focused on security, immigration, trade, and tariffs. With both nations recalibrating their priorities, the direction of this alliance is more important than ever. So here's our outlook for 2026.
I'm Larry Greenwood, chair of the Japan Society of Northern California. Welcome to the program. This is the latest in our annual Japan Outlook series, which looks at what's coming up in the year ahead. Because of the recent elections in Japan last Sunday, we thought we would focus this year's discussion on those elections and what the results mean for Japan's economy, for its national security, for its relationship with the United States. We have with us today two well-known experts on Japan and the U.S.-Japan relationship. Let me introduce them first. Emma Chanlett-Avery is the Director of Political Security Affairs at the Asia Society Policy Institute in Washington, D.C. Before joining the Asia Society, she worked for, I guess, almost or a little bit more than 2 decades with the Congressional Research Service, where she was responsible for actually educating a whole generation of congressmen and senators, or at least trying to educate them about Asia and Japan, and did a great job doing that. She's also the chairwoman of the National Association of Japan-America Societies, of which the Japan Society of Northern California is a member. Second speaker is Aburaki. He is managing director of the Japan office of BowerGroupAsia, a government relations and strategic consulting firm with offices in virtually every Asian nation. Kiyo has extensive experience in international business through his long career at Keidanren, Japan's premier business association. I think everyone here online knows that. And his duties included stints heading the Keidanren's office in Washington, D.C., as well as some time at the well-known think tank CSIS. And some of you, who particularly if you've been involved in Japan societies around the country, will probably remember Kiyo because of his time at the Keizai Koho Center, where he was responsible for funding speaker programs among Japan societies. And we were grateful to be the recipient of one of those grants. So without further ado, let's, so what I'm going to do is I'll ask some questions of Emma and Kiyo. And then I'm going to open it up to the audience. And so start thinking of your questions now. As you think of them, put them in the chat function. Yeah, you can use that. If we select your question, we'll be asking you if you want to do that, ask the question in person online. We'll unmute you to do that, or you can just simply ask us to present your question on your behalf. So let's start. Sanae Takaichi seems to be very good at surprising people. It was a surprise to many that she won the LDP presidency last fall. Then after LDP's traditional ally, the Komeito Party, bolted, that raised concerns about her ability to even put together a coalition. But she quickly found a new partner and formed a government, making her Japan's first female prime minister. And then she calls a snap election. And while I think most people expected there would be a LDP victory, maybe even a landslide, I don't think anybody expected that it would be a record result in terms of numbers of seats for the ruling party. So Takaichi seems to be on a roll. So let me start with you, Kiyo. Why was Takaichi so successful? How did she pull this off? What were some of the main issues in the elections that seemed to play in her favor?
Yeah, thank you very much, Larry. My name is Kiyoaki, currently managing director for Japan BowerGroupAsia. And as Larry said, that when I was in Keidanren and Keizai Koho Center, we developed a close tie with National Association of Japan-American Society, NAJAS. And then we have developed the business speaker series. It was launched by, I think 2010 or 2012. And then starting with the Toyota speaker, there are a lot of speakers. I know that San Francisco, Northern California, Japan Society have they conducted several programs under in the collaboration with Keidanren and Keizai Koho Center. And this is really good thing to me, because of I really love respect Bay Area people. people like you. So therefore, it's a great opportunity for me to, to participate in the discussion or conversation with you today. Thank you. So, about the why Takaichi was so successful, I think mainly, three reasons. Mainly three reasons. First of all, Takaichi-san, dissolved the diet. But at that time, her popularity, her supporting ratio, over 70%. In the history of Japan, no prime minister dissolved the diet, lower house, with this level of public supporting ratio. Abe-san, when he became the prime minister 2012, associated with the political regime change from DPJ to back to LDP, he was very popular. But at that time, he became prime minister, after the general elections. And he dissolved the diet in 2 years. At that time, he didn't, enjoy the supporting ratio or around 70%. In Koizumi, 2005, he was very popular. He also bring the big victory to LDP. But at that time, his popularity, he already, serving as the prime minister several years, 3 years, 4 years. So Takaichi-san is very fortunate because Takaichi-san keeps the popularity 70% or 75% popularity, then entering the election. I think this is very important, factors. And secondly, the second factor could be oppositions are weak. Opposition were weak. Maybe we can discuss a little later, but the LD, CDP used to be largest opposition party in the Diet, led by Yoshihiko Noda, and also Komeito. They united to create a new party. But everybody, this is a kind of reaction, or last minute reaction, with in front of the unexpected dissolvement of the Diet. And they did not make a clearly, show that the policy there, many people wondered, what's the difference, in terms of national security policy between the two parties, or renewable energy utilization. They are clearly, said different things. Everybody sees this last minute, reaction to survive elections. So, opposition were weak. This second factor. And the third factor should be style of Takaichi-san. She's very straightforward and very clearly says something. You can, back to 2005, Koizumi-san's, statement, very clear, very directly appealing to the, constituencies. Takaichi-san's style is something like that. So I think that this could be her style, but very much appealing to the Takai, constituency. I think that this is a very three major reasons why LDP have such a long, historic victory.
I can ask Emma. Emma, what's your sense of the issues that were at play here? And Kiyo mentioned that there was actually kind of a differentiation between the parties on issues, which is a little unusual in Japan because they usually are pretty close, particularly the two middle parties. What was your sense of some of those issues and how much did they really play in this election? Or was it more just about her straightforward style?
I mean, I think I would have to give the edge to her style. First of all, thank you, Larry, for having me. But that we saw at play here, this was a total gambit, that she would dissolve the Diet, the lower house, this soon into her tenure. Particularly when you think about the fact that the LDP, the Liberal Democratic Party, was basically near collapse before she rose to the position of prime minister. Really in disarray. So the fact that she really felt that her popularity was going to have, enough coattails to bring the LDP along. And I think that her unconventional style of being very hardworking, very bold, very forward-leaning on national security issues, but also a little bit of a playful style has really appealed to the Japanese public. It's sort of a breath of fresh air in the staid world of Japanese electoral politics. Her background is quite unorthodox for a politician in Japan too. She comes from a relatively modest background from Nara, not a Kantojin like a lot of them. She's not a third generation or fourth generation politician. So I think that the combination of all those things just really appealed to a huge spectrum of Japanese voters too. I mean, the demographically, she captured, very young people, but older people too. Geographically, she covered a huge span. So clearly, there was an image here that I think really propelled her victory and the LDP's victory.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's a bit of a surprise to me just following politics in Japan is that she's never, at least occurred to me, that kind of person. I mean, she never struck me as a Koizumi type of flamboyant character. She was seen as this right-wing politician, obviously ally of Abe, but very much kind of almost a shadowy figure. So it's interesting how she changed this image of her. Kyo, is that a change, you think, or was she always the rock drummer, the rock star drummer?
Yeah, he the rock star drummer, and he actually that he loved the Toyota Supra, he driving herself in a very famous story. And many people recognize he changed her makeup style a little bit. This is obviously, she tried to show some soft image, but this is good. And but I think Takaichi-san, she joined the Diet when Shinzo Abe joined Diet, more than 30 years ago. And then that they allied, but she experiences, several, newly established parties other than LDP. So her travel, to the prime minister, quite complicated sometimes. But she changed herself. But the most important point is that when Shinzo Abe back to prime minister, the Shinzo Abe is actually that asked her to serving as the chairman of a policy council of LDP. When then she managed all of the LDP policies, and she's very knowledgeable about policy issues. And also that she's I think she's the second the minister in charge of economic security, and following her predecessor is Takaichi Kobayashi, then Sanae Takaichi, not Abe, Sanae Takaichi, and then she knows that national security issue, and also she also long-serving minister of Ministry of Interior and the Communications, MIC. So I think these policy development and they actually she experiences actually that provide her very well balanced and the policy idea, her spectrum, policy spectrum quite large, and she's very much knowledgeable about policies. This is important. Especially when she talks to constituency in a bit about a complicated policy issue in her own words. I think this is one of the important points. When she became a prime minister, that many people, especially many people engage in a diplomatic relation with China, actually show some concern. But I think what she did when she met in Xi Jinping in Korea, I think she did a very good job. Then the one very simple question to her people like her is whether or not do you want to visit Yasukuni Shrine? She didn't visit Yasukuni Shrine after she assumed office. Do you remember when Shinzo Abe, became prime minister the first time? The first country he visited was China. And also when she, in 2012, when Shinzo Abe became the prime minister again, and then he visited Yasukuni Shrine once, but after that, he didn't visit Yasukuni Shrine until the end of his tenure as the prime minister. So I think Abe-san is thinking something. I believe, Takaichi-san thinking something to stabilize the relation with China. I think this kind of attitude actually that it relieves that people who used to have some concern about her actions in terms of Japan-China relations. I stop here.
So she's trying to assuage those fears. Emma, on the policy side, then national security, immigration, and economics were, I guess, the three big issues in the election. Economics being kind of a mix of fiscal stimulus and doing something to bring prices down. I'm not sure what a prime minister can do to bring prices down. But anyway, those are the three big issues. I mean, how did those play? Kyo just mentioned the national security point. How do you think those played with the electorate? And do you have a sense of whether this election represents some kind of generational shift in terms of how Japanese look at some of these issues, particularly on the national security and immigration side?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's somewhat unusual that national security played this heavily in an election. So that does indicate some sort of shift in awareness of the geopolitical situation surrounding Japan. I mean, I think that this is a trend that certainly accelerated with this election, but the Japanese populace, I think, has been becoming more concerned about Japan's security, more willing to expend more resources on Japan's own security. Where I really saw the needle move for the Japanese public, which, of course, traditionally has been very pacifist, was actually the invasion of Ukraine. There was really a change in, at least in the opinion polls then, that just sort of realized, oh, bad guys do bad things, and saw sort of the parallel with Taiwan and China in their own neighborhood. So I think that has been a trend at play here. Now, I think that's not, I don't want to overstate that, because I think that a lot of the reason that, the opposition parties weren't able to gain any traction, and they did campaign more on more restraint in national security, certainly, than Takaichi has represented traditionally. But they just weren't able to get their act together in this very, very short time frame. And so I don't think that all of the wave of support, I mean, to get to this historic victory where you have a super majority of the lower house, was driven by a number of factors. But I do think that there's just generally more awareness of the really severe security landscape that's surrounding Japan now.
On the economic side, how important was the messages that Takaichi used on the economy, in particular the cost of living?
Yeah, thank you, Larry. I think this is very closely related to why Takaichi-san, LDP, obtained such a big win. Because of do you remember that the Takaichi, after Takaichi-san taking office in late October, what she did is that to achieve that income tax reduction and gasoline tax reductions. Actually, this is not a new idea. Actually 1 year ago, more than 1 year ago, Ishiba-san, as a prime minister, and we agree with the Komeito and the DPP to achieve that the gasoline tax reduction and the income tax reduction pretty soon. But under the Ishiba cabinet, nothing happened. Actually that what Takaichi-san did is that she did it within 2 months. By the end of last year. I think this is very much appealing to the, constituency, people like, me, myself probably. And because of, we recognize that the gasoline actually become much cheaper, because of a tax, tax reductions. And high cost is that the people actually that are suffering high cost because one of the reasons it could be the current exchange rate. But Takaichi-san, went, she called the snap elections. LDP can say, Takaichi government did this. Then we want to do this more. So therefore, please support us. I think this logic, actually really works. I think in politics, you agree, I believe, that in politics, people appreciate, respect, the party or politician, what he did something, but it did something, not what it proposed something. So I think in this case, the what she did is in terms of gathering tax reduction and income tax reduction is a credit for Takaichi or LDP, not for oppositions. I think this could be, and so therefore, Takaichi government always cared high cost of living, price issue, plus hike issue. But we need to do this. We need to have a general election to promote, accelerate this policy. I think this is quite appealing.
I wonder also if people like the idea that she was able to push back against the Ministry of Finance, because obviously the Ministry of Finance wasn't very interested in that outcome. And that raises the question as to what kinds of restraints and constraints will she face moving forward. Emma, what do you think? I mean, she now has a supermajority, as you mentioned. I mean, that helps on the legislative side, but she still, of course, will have to fight the bureaucratic battles, the bureaucracy quite. The Kasumi Gaseki is still strong, despite being weaker than it was maybe 30 years ago when I was dealing with it. But what kinds of constraints does she have to do her main agenda, which is, of course, increase defense spending, and then do more on the fiscal expansion?
Well, she of course doesn't have a majority in the upper house. Lower house is more powerful, and a supermajority gives you the ability to override any decision by the upper house. So she'll face, some probably minimal resistance if she can keep her coalition together in terms of advancing her own domestic agenda. But that doesn't mean that it's smooth sailing. Now she and it's almost a consensus now that you increase the defense spending somewhat, but there hasn't really been a plan laid out for exactly how you're going to pay for this. So it's one thing to say you support national security, another thing to actually figure out a way to pay for it that avoids taxing the citizenship and going further into debt. So I think that will be somewhat of a challenge. She also needs to update and finalize 3 security documents. And these documents initially passed under the Kishida government did go quite a ways in terms of advancing Japan's security agenda, resourcing its own defense more. But to be as bold as some of her past statements have said, it's still going to be, I think, a fight to get some of those changes instituted into the security documents. And that's just domestically. Internationally, she's got a lot of challenges as well. She has a summit with President Trump coming up very quickly in March. And of course, she wants to keep that alliance at least on sides, convince the United States that the US is a reliable ally, and probably looking very closely at how Trump and President Xi Jinping of China, how that summit's going to go. I imagine that in her March summit with Trump, she's going to try and establish some common objectives and hopefully put up some guardrails so that Trump doesn't give concessions on Taiwan when he meets with Trump if he's really just aiming for an economic deal. She also has, regional considerations here. Obviously, China is furious at her for the remarks she made just a few weeks ago on Taiwan. And they're threatening to cut off rare earths and other dual use exports to Japan, which obviously would be really difficult on Japan's economy. And we also just can't lose sight of the fact that while she has put sort of a fresh face on Japan and has a lot of bold ideas and certainly has established some degree of political stability, Japan still faces some major challenges here. I mean, the demographic situation in Japan is quite dire. The yen is still very weak, inflation is still high. So she has sort of a whole host of domestic problems as well as international challenges, and that's a lot to balance.
Kyo, what do you think in terms of the kinds of challenges that she's facing, and is obviously she's in a stronger position than if she hadn't done so well. So that's it certainly helps to have this victory. But what do you see as some of the major challenges she's going to have to basically do, as you say, not just propose but actually execute on the promises that she made in the election?
Yeah, the actually that Takaichi government is very strong, very very strong. Which she got because she got a mandate, the from the people at the general election. However, who knows? Who knows? In 4 years, who knows in 4 years? I'm telling this. Do you know that many people recognize that know that what happened in the 2005 election under Koizumi? What happened in 4 years? In 4 years, regime changes. Hatoyama-san became prime minister. Hatoyama-san became prime minister. DPJ at the time had more seats than Takaichi had these elections. But what happened in 3 years? Regime change again back to LDP. And so this means that I remember that when Hatoyama-san became prime minister, I thought at that time I was in charge of political strategy at Kedanren. At that time, that I thought that the DPJ administration will continue forever. But in 6 months, everything starting to change. So I think so. What I mean that the Takaichi had a big expectation. So she have to, meet this level expectations. So this is a really important challenge she has, domestically, internationally. Domestically, that she already promised several things, including the consumption tax reduction for food for just for 2 years. I think this could be acceptable by Minister of Finance, and because the such a tax cut is not always not a good idea in Minister of Finance. However, that corporate tax reduction taking place last decades resulted in the highest revenue of corporate tax. This is also true. So this is but we should carefully promote this kind of tax reduction idea. But I think the Takaichi-san, the most important point is what Takaichi-san should do something, should achieve the result. When she promised what she promised did this, and she showed the outcomes. I think this is important. In terms of international, national security, aspect, I believe the Japanese people consistency, including the media, becoming more realistic, than 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, of course. And within LDP political, policy campaign, policy platform for this campaign, for general election, LDP said we will strengthen, promote some. LDP clearly said that promote more, arms export. The prepare more, I think this is very, important policy. But if 20 years ago, if Hashimoto government proposed this kind of idea, I think this could be collapse. But nobody care at this moment, because this is true. This always, we know that Korea did, United States did, Japan have a collaboration with UK and Italy, and also in front of threat or geographical changes in Southeast Asia, this is very serious. We cannot, stand alone. We should do something. I think this is a kind of a consensus. Therefore, that when Kishida-san proposed the idea to increase the defense budget, no significant resistance, from the public, in terms of defense spending, increase. So I think people, even left-wing people can understand this. So I think this is very good thing, but Takaichi-san Prime Minister always have accountabilities to the consistency and the international partner like another state, like President Trump. Then we, the media said, government said that the U.S.-Japan summit could take place in March 19th in Washington, D.C. Obviously, that the Japanese commitment, huge commitment of Japan investment in U.S., what happened after that? I think this is very important, to come to discussion. I think that in terms of security arena, Takaichi should be very much well aligned with, Donald Trump, but econ sector, but how to promote the Japanese investment in the U.S. This, to the level of the Japanese government committee, and also how to increase the collaboration between U.S. and Japanese company in high tech area. This is very important to the Bay Area people, I believe.
That's great. I do want to continue on the U.S.-Japan implications of this, but just before that, just to follow up on an earlier point, that is a change of public opinion about national security. Emma, do you think now that there is a supermajority, there's actually it could be realistic to actually put forward a constitutional amendment? What do you think the possibilities of seeing more happening around a possible constitutional amendment, particularly Article 9? Going forward?
So this is a tricky one. I know that Takaichi wants to change the constitution. That was a longstanding hope of Shinzo Abe, and she is his protege, so we contribute to his legacy in some ways. But it's a really high bar to pass a constitutional amendment. You have to get 2/3 of both houses, of the lower house and the upper house. The upper house, as we said, is not controlled by the LDP. And even if you get that 2/3 majority in both houses through horse trading or however you do it, there's a national referendum that has to be passed also. A majority of Japanese citizens have to agree to the specific language proposed to amend the Constitution. So I think that if she wants to expend that degree of political capital, I think it would be at the expense of some other priorities. Also, there's a big question about how you change the Constitution. I mean, there's a great desire to change it because it's a completely American authored document and has not been amended since it was certainly basically imposed on the Japanese people. But there are a lot of questions about how you would change it. The biggest, the one that gets the most attention, of course, is Article 9, that denies Japan the use of force to solve international disputes. But there are other things that some of the opposition parties want to put in as well. So there could be some compromises, but each of the amendments would need to be voted on in the process that I laid out. And I also think that changing the Constitution now, considering the deep threats that Japan faces, it might be considered a little, too little, too late, sort of. Like the ship has sailed. That Constitution has been, and particularly Article 9, has been reinterpreted a number of times that allows Japan to develop a much more capable, much more flexible military. And in my conversations with U.S. military officials over the years, I think there's not a desire to mess with that, that they have been able to do what they want to do with the alliance through reinterpretation. So I think it might be a mistake. I mean, who am I to say? Takaichi obviously has exceeded our expectations so far as Prime Minister, but it would take up a lot of time. It could be very divisive within the population. So that said, she's a true believer, and would really like to be able to claim that victory. I'll also say that it bears noting that Shinzo Abe very much wanted to change the Constitution and was not able to do it despite being the longest serving prime minister in post-war Japanese history. And his proposed change in the end was fairly modest. It was just to call the self-defense forces a military. Which you wouldn't think would be that controversial, yet it was still too steep of a hill to climb politically.
Kiyo, what do you think? A constitutional amendment, or it's not needed really?
Not easy. I totally agree with Emma. I know that the people, who participated this, in this meeting recognize that how Japan works, to amend constitutions clearly. And but I think the Takaichi-san want to do, what is clear, Article 9 of a constitution, Japan constitution said that Japan does not have military capabilities, air, land, marine, and sea. I think this is clearly that, but we have a self-defense force. I think I believe that she wants to, have make the constitution provide a good position, the offer to self-defense force, because Article 9, clearly, the people who read the Article 9 very first time in their life believe that it's very easy to why Japan have a self-defense force. It looks like a military. So I think this is at a very big things. So I think this I believe that she wants to change this this kind of situations. So, but at the same time, and in the history of Japan, as you know, the decision made in a diet, and no proposal of amendment of constitutional amendment presented to the diet yet. So I think she wants to do something, but this does not mean that the constitution will be revised soon. But I think this is very, very difficult highball. Then also it takes a huge political capital. I remember that in the history said in case of Koizumi, he proposed that the change of the privatization of postal services very the end of his tenure. I think probably she might utilize, invest all of her political capital, to move something, but not completion of a constitutional change, but some actions, maybe later her tenure, maybe. But at this moment, she there's a lot of things to do. She has,
Actually, let me go back to something you said earlier, Kyo, about the defense sector. It's a slightly different question, and that is one of the aspects of U.S.-Japan cooperation that is very important for the Bay Area, for Silicon Valley, is the innovation and startup initiatives that started before with Abe, but Kishida had his own initiative for startups. Ishiba also pushed it. Takaichi didn't talk much about startups and innovation during the election, but do you think that those kinds of programs that have been pushed pretty consistently by Japan for the last pretty much since Abe visited Palo Alto in 2015, is that likely to continue under Takaichi? What do you think how does she feel about this area? Because we don't hear much from her about this.
Yeah, I think she definitely should continue or strengthen the policy. Most important part of the policy campaign, policy platform is that, Japanese government will invest more in the strategic sector like AI, semiconductor and others, because of, we know that, the many government, including US, Korea, China, of course, I think these government do something, to support the production of it's an activity for these, R&D and production activity of these companies, in the strategic sectors. The Japanese government, probably many people, would be surprised that until recently, Japanese government did not provide direct finance support, direct subsidy to the production activity of Japanese company, large companies. They supported R&D, but not productions. So maybe then, the METI want to do something, many things. The METI, in collaboration with Japanese semiconductor company, created Elpida, the Japanese memory company. But Elpida was bankrupt. But even in other cases, the Japanese government did not support the production activity of Elpida. But today, they do, because this is important. This is the Japanese government supports subsidy TSMC from Taiwan investment in Kumamoto, and also the Micron investment in Hiroshima, which produce HBM3, AI memory. And then I think that this Takaichi government want to continue this kind of investment and startup. No one disagree with the importance of startup for Japanese economy. So I think that this trend will continue or strengthened. I believe the Japanese government will secure more budget for government investment.
Emma, what's your take on this in terms of, in particular, the U.S.-Japan kind of cooperation area? It received a lot of attention during the Biden administration in terms of cooperation between industries. It's gotten some momentum from Trump in terms of, particularly more on the Japanese investment in the United States as opposed to cooperation. But on the technology side, what is your sense of where Takaichi will go?
Well, Takaichi has spoken a lot about bolstering Japan's own defense industry, including relaxing the 3 principles on arms exports so that Japan can actually be an exporter of some of its defense goods, and they have a new program in addition to the overt official development assistance, basically aid. They now have official security assistance with particular partners, especially in Southeast Asia. So they are looking to sort of develop that cooperation and that sort of arms trade in the region, which would be a departure for Japan. Defense industrial cooperation, we talk about it a lot. It's in practice really hard to do. You have to exchange sensitive information. You need to have security clearances that carry across borders. So I think that there is a desire to do this, but implementing it may be harder than we actually think. There also just needs to be strategic trust between partners to do this. And while the U.S.-Japan alliance is operationally has demonstrated a lot of resilience despite the turmoil of tariffs negotiations and the chaotic nature of some of this deal making that we've seen in the last year. There's strains. There's real strains on the alliance. There's demands, that Japan spend even well beyond 2% of its GDP, up to 3.5 or 5% is what the Trump administration has said is now the gold standard. There's also host nation support negotiations that are coming up this year, and those negotiations are always very contentious and promise to be even more so. There's an emphasis in the national security strategy on demanding that allies pay more for their own defense. So we anticipate those to be pretty tough negotiations for Japan. So I think this all feeds into a degree of uncertainty and a fear that the United States won't live up to its security commitments. President Trump has been very open in his skepticism of U.S. alliances. So I think that while Takaichi and Japan generally very much wants to keep the U.S.-Japan alliance intact and think that they need that for deterrence against an increasingly aggressive China, I do think that there's been some fundamental strains of distrust in the relationship, and I think that without the real assurance that the United States is going to be there and to protect Japan's security, it makes it hard to go really deep in defense industrial sharing as well.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Kyo, I wanted to drill down a little bit on the 500 billion pledge on investment. Obviously, you're very closely aligned with and engaged with Japanese business, particularly through your old friends in Keidanren. Is there going to be? Do you think there is increased interest from Japanese companies to invest in the United States, in particular in these economic security areas that the U.S. that the agreement talks about? That investments that have a national security implication, critical minerals, things like that. are you sensing any increased interest from Japanese companies to be part of this $500 billion investment?
Yeah, thank you, Larry. As you know, that why Kedan established the Japan, business speaker series with Nages is that Japanese company always much more interested in investment in the United States. We are good guy, and then this is true. This is always true. This is true today. But frankly that the U.S.-Japan align the agreement, 550 billion US dollar Japan investment in US. I'm not fully aware. I'm not fully aware, about what's going on inside, frankly. But the national security, economic security part, project, which is not easy to do in Japan, but we can do in the United States. And I think this kind of theme could be the very important, promising project in the US, such as nuclear related, new SMR and others. Oh, I don't know. And I think this is always true. And in terms of a critical mineral supply chain, I think attention is becoming much higher than before, unexpected, unprecedented. I believe that the U.S.-Japan collaboration and the Japan, other like-minded countries like UK and others for securing the critical mineral. I think that this is one of the most important policy themes for Takaichi today. And but the question is that that the U.S. government proposed that a kind of a flat price, floor price mechanism for rare earth product. I think that this is pretty good idea. And also the U.S. government promotes the collaboration with in Lobito corridor in Africa. I think that this is a very important point. And but in terms of the Lobito corridor in Africa, Japanese government does not participate in the project yet. And so I think maybe there could be. I personally believe that this could be the kind of a new symbol of U.S.-Japan collaboration for securing critical mineral, including the rare earths. And but in case that I think that this could be. I don't know how this, Japanese participation in Lobito corridor, counted in a Japanese commitment in a U.S. Japanese investment in the U.S. But I think that this U.S.-Japan collaboration should be flexible, should be broadened, to achieve the policy goal shared by U.S. government and Japanese government.
Yeah, I think that was part of the idea, certainly for critical minerals of the meeting that took place this week with Vice President Vance, was to get that kind of coalition going, which I think is encouraging. Let me ask Peter Kelly, who I think you all know very well, to ask the next question. Peter?
My question is, how real is the apparent improvement in relations between Japan and South Korea? It seems like Takaichi has put effort into that, and could that be a foreign policy initiative for her?
It's great to see you. So this is a great question. I think that when Takaichi came into power with she's obviously very conservative and has said things that have been upsetting to South Korea in the past. And in Seoul, we have a progressive president. Usually, a conservative prime minister in Japan and a progressive president in South Korea is a terrible mix. And they relitigate, very real history issues, but have not been able to move past those. And lo and behold, we have seen both leaders really making efforts to develop that bilateral relationship. Great PR, whoever set up that summit, with them drumming it out together is a genius. And they've also, I think, done some real deepening of their own security cooperation. And my interpretation of this is that you're probably not going to have the United States facilitating trilateral cooperation nearly as much as in the past. And I think that both the leaders and the publics in both Japan and in South Korea really realize that the stakes are just higher now the threats have just grown, and that there's every reason for these two countries to work together, particularly if the United States is sort of retrenching and receding from leadership. But let me just say, on this point, Takaichi has said she does want to continue to visit the Yasukuni Shrine, which is a very controversial shrine that honors Japan's wartime dead, including several Class A war criminals. And in the past, this has been very upsetting to South Korea. So she has said that she will seek understanding of Japan's neighbors if she visits again. But my sense is that this newfound, cooperation and friendship between South Korea and Japan would be very much put to the test if she visited Yasukuni as prime minister. So I hope that there is some sensitivity and consideration of the importance of keeping that leg of the trilateral relationship strong between Seoul and Tokyo.
And so the question is, would Takaichi's election and strong position have any impact on central bank actions and on the Japanese yen carry trade?
But I think it's a very difficult question, actually. Looking back at when Japan experienced the 311 disaster in 2012, I thought the Japanese yen should be depreciated, but becoming more hyper appreciated, and then it was very much unexpected. But today, I think in terms of macroeconomic coordination, I don't think Takaichi want to try to cause any dramatic changes. I don't think, and because of stability is a very important key for everybody. Current level exchange rate is bad for somebody, but good for somebody. If yen will be appreciated, good for somebody and bad for somebody. And also maybe I think that this is some stability always key. The fluctuation always not a good idea. But sometimes when fluctuation will take place, I think the central bank try to stabilize this kind of situations. So I think it's the best I can say. Japanese company have always have two faces. Who appreciate that, who welcome the depreciation, and also who welcome the appreciation. So they're very much, even in the same company have the two faces. So I think that this is very important. But stability is key.
Basically, you were mentioning, Japan has some serious population issues, which at least to me seem to be 20, 30, 40, 50-year type problems. And a lot of the things that we're dealing with now are much more short term. And so you have a population of people that are not really interested in having children. They perceive it as being too difficult. You have an aging population that is probably a bit more conservative leaning and may not want increased foreigner presence, which you're going to need in the short term to address some of the issues that are currently ongoing. And so how do you balance that? Because, these are very long-term problems that require long-term solutions. And is Takaichi and the government thinking about these problems as they address some of these maybe more shorter-term issues, for the country?
Emma, you want to take the first shot at that, or you want?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if I had the solution for solving this demographic crisis, I'd be a very rich woman probably. But it is definitely a tension. But she has been seen as being less amenable to further immigration, which Japan is just going to need for their labor force and to take care of the very elderly population there. So that is a tension. I also think that I'm not sure the data completely bears this out, but this is my impression, is that Japanese women couples tend to have babies if they get married, but they're just not getting married either. And maybe that has to do with some of the gender roles that are expected in Japan. I mean, I have lots and lots of Japanese girlfriends, and they're just like I don't want that life, you know. I don't want to, like, there's no child help with childcare. There's, you know, your husband works long hours far away. This might be changing somewhat now, but I think that that is a factor. Japan is not alone, to be clear in this. I mean, every advanced Asian country, you know, is seeing the same thing. Taiwan, South Korea, um, um, Hong Kong, Singapore, they're all facing like a really low birth rate. So it's a prime example of where Japan, you know, needs to cooperate with other countries, share best practices. You know, what has worked to reverse demographic trends in the past. So there's still just a lot of work to be done, and this is generations, you know, before you can actually recover that. I mean, China itself is actually now very desperate for their population to produce more children after years of controlling it.
Yeah, just I've seen, you know, I think it was in January, Takaichi signed, it looked like it was a study. It was just a Kento, I mean, the Japanese word Kento, Sudo, you know, for exploring harder exams, higher barriers for foreigners. And maybe it's just a follow on to what you're talking about. This swings back and forth. I mean, I've been living and working in Japan for many years, so I've seen it go back and forth. And as Emma mentioned, they need more foreigners, whether they like it or not. I'm just curious if the panelists think that was just kind of political theater, or if there's really going to be a change as a consequence of, you know, these right-wing parties really want to push harder, and I think some of that is going on there, and it's just not clear to me if it's just performative. I'd be curious to get your view on that.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey. And this is very important questions. I think the Takaichi-san tried to do in terms of immigration and the foreigner policy is not, you know, quite different. It's not different from Ishiba tried to do or Kishida tried to do. You know, because of you know, the campaign promises and government policy continue, and which say, in my sense, it represents you know, the rationalization or globalization of the Japan's immigration policies, in a sense. And for example, that the you know, one of the criticism, you know, the many media carry in terms of foreign people issue here is that you know, you know that we have insurance, social security insurance systems, you know, and public insurance systems in Japan, and if regardless of nationality of a person, if she or he stayed in Japan 3 months or more, they are eligible, you know, to participate health insurance, you know, so I think it's a pretty good deal, you know, if, you know, she or he stayed in Japan maybe 6 months, but then come back to, you know, home country, that this could be their health, you know, medical expense, you know, medical services, you know, covered by the health insurance, public insurance. So this is a pretty good deal. But I think that system actually was developed. One important assumptions, you know, in Japan, only Japanese lives, you know, and in Japan, health insurance, you know, it's an insurance, you know, paid by everybody. So once, you know, people who start working in Japan, you know, continue to work many years, you know, I think this is kind of important assumptions. But the currently that this assumption is not, you know, working very well. And so then also this is one example. The other example is that you know, when you know, people who do not have Japan nationality, if she or he want to work in Japan, they need, you know, working visa. But in case of working visa in Japan, company does not, no need to finding out sponsoring company over visa, working visa for foreigners. You know, in a sense, you know, once BJA, if, you know, BJA Japan, you know, hire the foreigner, you know, for Americans, you know, without non-Japanese nationality, you know, then we do not have to sponsor the working visa. But she or he obtain a visa with you know, submitting the supporting document, and once she or he obtain a visa, they can change, you know, companies. I think that this is the, you know, this assumption always, this is, quite actually that is not, well, not so much reasonable under the current situations. So I think this is the, such situation, the maybe, first of all, that we should have a, government want to try to establish a very reasonable basis of immigration policy. And also the, people here, and also at the same time, it is a kind of national kind of consensus. We need kind of foreigners, if not that many companies cannot operate only with the Japanese national. I think to achieve in the sound transformation, smooth transformation, require some basis or rule, clear, fair rules. I think, since Ishiba-san's administration, it's a government, this is what the government will try to do. The Takaichi-san will not change at this moment. But I think this is very important part of Takaichi-san's policy because of this directly related to the people. I think we should carefully, watching it.
So it sounds like it's not a major move against immigration, but just tightening up the regulations to make them more reasonable.
Yeah, but some political party say something, but they lost.
Right, the Sanseito obviously has a much more blatantly anti-immigrant.
Yeah, and the Nihon Hoshito, they try to set a limit. But I think to set the limit, some reasonable explanation should be required. And I think people should be, they at this moment the discussion quite calm and reasonable. And but we should. I understand that some concern, outside, from people, outside Japan, but we should, at this moment, very, calm and, very reasonable conversations. We should have some reasonable basis.
Yeah. Well, also, I would certainly urge the Japanese government to also be clear about what they want to foreigners living in Japan today, because it's not just people outside of Japan. Frankly, I have American friends in Japan who also are concerned about the tightening of the immigration policy. So it's important to explain to them what they really have in mind. Great. Well, thank you very much. This has been fantastic. Unfortunately, we have to end it. And thank you all for your participation in the audience. Thank you, Emma and Kyo, for a wonderful discussion. I certainly learned a lot. I hope the audience did as well. Let me ask Steve Pollock to take it home and to close the event. Steve?
Thank you, Larry, and thank you, Kyo and Emma, for a great conversation today. I think we all come away from the conversation with better insight into what's going on in Japan and what we can expect over the coming months. As always, I'm sure there'll be many twists and turns throughout the year, and we look forward to engaging with all of you as we go forward. Let me thank all of the attendees for coming to today's program and mention that we have a lot more coming in the next few weeks. I think including today's program, we have 6 programs between now and the end of February coming up. Next week, we have a program on the Art Lover's Guide to Japanese Museums. We have a program on semiconductors coming up at the end of the month. We have a program on Japanese traditional and contemporary culture coming at the beginning of March. And you can find out about all those things on our website at usajapan.org and register for them. Almost all of our programs are free to attend. And so we hope you'll be able to join us for whatever looks to be of interest to you. So thank you again, Kyo and Emma, for sharing your insights about Japanese politics and economics over the coming year, and Larry for leading a great conversation. And thank you to all of those of you who joined us for today's program. And we look forward to seeing you soon.
Building bridges between the United States and Japan since 1905. Japan Society.